Good evening and welcome to Trending Tonight. I am Sanket Upadhyay. In this show, we try to explain to you the news behind the trend. Our two top stories that we are going to track. Let's deal with story number one, and that deals with China. The fact that many countries across the world have now decided to either restrict China's companies or China's entry, or in some cases, like that in India, they have made their norms a little strict so that China cannot make an entry or try to buy or take a hostile takeover of many Indian companies in this time of distress. So let's go one by one. The original story, where did it all begin? You know what has happened today, but where did it all begin? China's central bank bought 1.01% stake in HDFC Limited. That's the number of shares on your screen right now. Stake on behalf of the Chinese Sovereign Wealth Fund, SAFE. HDFC chairman had told in a response saying that transaction is not for Chinese central bank itself. The share price of HDFC ended 2.8% lower on 13th of April after the Bank of China bought its shares. Now then what happened? Suddenly there was a reminder, the Indian government was reminded that across the globe, this is a phenomenon that has been spoken of. Let's go full frame to this tweet so that you can understand what Rahul Gandhi wrote. In his tweet, he said that the massive economic slowdown has weakened many Indian corporates, making them attractive targets for takeovers. The government must not allow foreign interests to take control of any Indian corporate at this time of national crisis. Now, very recently over the weekend, the government issued an order, a change in the FDI rules. What are those changes? Right there on your screen. New restrictions were in place where new curbs were imposed on takeovers, not necessarily Chinese. The word Chinese was not used in the order, but it was implied. New curbs decided in the cabinet meeting. The curbs were all set or designed to restrict this form of Chinese investment and takeover to prevent opportunistic takeovers during the time of a pandemic. Now this after Chinese investment in HDFC, the government brought in these curbs. They said any entity from a country sharing a land border with India needs government approval. That was the government's explanation. Now, what has China said today, and this is important to understand, China feels that this policy is discriminatory. They say that India revised the FDI rules last week, which means investments from countries like China will need the government of India's clearance first. They then say that this violates WTO's principle of non-discrimination and goes against the general trend of liberalisation and facilitation of trade and investment. Now, see, the point is, where exactly is India wrong if it is trying to protect its interests when the world over the same is happening? Let's give you the example of Japan, where Japan decided to fund multinationals to help them leave China. Japan has in fact they've set aside $2.2 billion to help manufacturers. Imports from China are down by half. In February, Japan manufacturers have in fact been affected. Apart from this, you've got similar FDI restrictions by Australia. Germany is talking, or they're miffed, they're talking about possible withdrawal of investment. You've got the US, of course, which is in a trade war with China. So let me now quickly introduce all our guests at this moment for them to analyze how should this be read. I want to introduce at this moment Lieutenant General Shankar Prasad, Professor Swaran Singh, he's the chairman of the Centre for International Politics. We have Supriya Srinath, the national spokesperson of the Congress Party, and Seshadri Chari is the strategic affairs expert and also leader of the BJP. Thank you so much, all of you all, for joining us. Mr. Seshadri Chari, I want to begin with you first. The government on its part did something which was the need of the hour. I mean, it's a rare occasion where the Congress stood shoulder to shoulder with the BJP, with the government, when this decision was taken. But do you think, on a larger point of view of this restricting China and going against the principles of the WTO, how valid is that criticism of China?
No, the criticism of China does not hold any water as far as particular tweaking of FDI norms are concerned. I think the Congress party has raised a very pertinent question, and it is very highly appreciated also at such a strange situation that we are facing. See, the most important thing is out of something like $621 billion of FDI that India has attracted so far, the China's contribution is only about 6 billion. That is not even 1.3%. So in spite of all the free entry norms that India had given to all the countries, including China, this is what they have done. And this 6 billion is also mainly on 50% of this 6 billion is on startups. So if at all there is any problem, is the startups should be actually saying that this will affect them. China has no reason to say this. A. B. As far as WTO norms are concerned, the 2017 WTO Ministerial Conference, the 11th Ministerial Conference, very categorically has said that FDI policies are subject to national interest. Every country is free to think in those terms. And in fact, they have even suggested that joint ventures and acquisitions and technological inputs can be different ways of getting FDI, and that is exactly what many countries have started doing. So I think there is no restriction as far as WTO is concerned, and what we have done
is protected our national interest.
Is nothing. You made an example. You gave an example of Japan.
Yeah.
I would very much want you to give an example of Italy. But the thing in what happened in Italy in 2016, 17, 18, 19 has resulted in a great chaos, economic chaos in that country, health chaos in that country, maximum number of coronavirus cases in Italy because of Hagga Chinese policy. So this is what has resulted their economy.
Okay.
And today, even a country like Germany and many other European Union countries have taken stand similar to that of China.
Okay.
Therefore, I'm sorry, similar to that of India. So I don't think there is any infringement of WTO.
Okay, interesting. Now, Supriya, bring in your expertise. I mean, you've been a business journalist. You're now associated with the Congress Party. I want to know, particularly from this point of view of the Chinese, when they say that this is a violation of WTO norms, this goes against the spirit of liberalization. I mean, what exactly does liberalization dictate? That you go ahead and expose your companies to the vulnerability of hostile takeovers and raids?
You know, I couldn't agree more with what Seshadri Chari said. I actually couldn't recognize him with a beard, sir. But on a more serious note, I think the point was first raised by Rahul Gandhi, and I don't want to take political pot shots here, but I'm glad the government acted the way it did, because what China has said today actually just exposes its hypocrisy and legitimizes the concerns that the government and the opposition had raised. Because we cannot allow hostile takeovers of Indian companies through creeping acquisition of shares. And that is exactly what China has been doing the world over. And Seshadri Chari is absolutely right. US, European nations, Germany, Australia have all reviewed their FDI policy in respect to China. And what China says today reeks of hypocrisy. If you really are so desperate to invest in India, you're welcome to invest in greenfield projects. You want to keep investing in companies through creeping acquisitions. This will result in hostile takeovers. And I'm glad the government of India took the stand that it did, because it is important to save your corporates. This is almost profiting in a pandemic, because shares are down, valuations are cheap. China is in the market to shop. I don't think we can allow China to do that with our Indian companies. So Rahul Gandhi was right in raising the issue. The government has been right in correcting its FDI policy and putting the house in order. We cannot allow hostile takeovers of our companies because their valuations are cheap today.
Correct. Professor Swaran Singh, I want to come to you now. You know, this rule change or the tweak that has come about talks about no direct FDI through the direct route or the automatic route. It is going to be through the government. Now, that is only restricted to the countries with which India shares its border. Now, a hypothetical situation, what if a company, say for instance in Singapore, which has lots of Chinese investment or Chinese money, decides to, you know, invest in India? Ultimately, it's going to be the same. I mean, this was a concern that was raised by a few people who felt that while you're taking a decision, it's good to tweak the rules in national interests. But if they actually have to do, if China actually has to go about and go for hostile takeovers, they will do so irrespective. There are many loopholes.
You're right, Sanket. You mentioned about India tweaking the rules vis-a-vis countries with which India has land border without calling China. Obviously, Afghanistan or Bangladesh, Bhutan are not the countries who are going to invest in India. It's clearly indicating to China. And of course, the rule also now says that any buying of shares by any Chinese companies, not just investing directly in Indian companies, but of course, there will always be loopholes. Interesting it is to know, of course, that India will fend for itself. India is protecting its medium and small industries, and that is how we did not sign the Regional Comprehensive Cooperation Agreement last November. But likewise, we have to defend our multinationals also. Now, why is China angry? Why are they calling it discriminatory? If you remember, on several occasions, Chinese have sought Indian help to seek legitimacy, and this time again, Foreign Minister Wang Yi had mentioned directly to Indian Foreign Minister Jaishankar not to allow in India the mention of Wuhan virus. So I think there is a certain expectation from India. And when the whole developed world is chasing India and trying to sort of demolish their credibility, it seems that a hit from India is perhaps deeper than what it appears apparently. So I think that answer from Chinese embassy and from China to say this is discriminatory is driven by that sense of expectation from India as a friendly country. But, obviously the takeovers from China are not a new story. For about 2 decades, several Western companies have been trying to save themselves. President of United States have intervened in such situations. And now, of course, when there is a complete global lockdown, economy is having a severe hit and there is a recession, obviously Chinese companies will go and do the shopping if they can. And I think therefore one has to understand
one
why
moment, Professor
China is
Swaran Singh,
reacting the
if
way
it is
to
obvious
India,
that Chinese companies are going to shop...
India to be a kind of neighborly, friendly country and not
Professor Swaran
do
Singh,
anything which will contribute to the Western campaign against China. At this
No, one moment. As you mentioned over here, Lieutenant General Shankar Prasad, see, the point is that at a time when it appears so obvious that China is going to go shopping, because obviously it will make economic sense for them to do so, it should also make proper sense for countries to keep their national interests first. So what is wrong if in India comes up with a policy like this? What is wrong with internationally countries coming up with a policy like this? I mean, if they want to protect themselves, protect their economic interests, economic or otherwise, should they not be allowed?
Anke, let me be very clear. If you look at the international situation today, there are many theories going around of where the needle of suspicion is going to. We are not going to talk about that at the moment. But what has happened as a result of this virus, the markets and the economy in the Western world and rest of the world where this virus has hit has suffered tremendously. And the economy is going to take a long time to come up. Even from the Chinese industry, many countries like Japan have pulled their investments out. China has huge investments in India as it is, not only in the banking industry, which you just spoke about, but also in the real estate industry. And this is the time when China feels that if they can ingress into the Indian market, they can get a cheap buy. Now the point is that we must remember that Chinese are planning these issues months and years ahead of time. Chinaman is very famous for it, that he plans well in advance. And obviously, he has planned all this. And therefore, he wanted to enter into the HDFC. And fortunately, the government of India realized in time that this is not going to be in the national interest. Therefore, they put some restrictions. Not to say those bordering India is perhaps a diplomatic way of saying, I'm not too sure that. But what is certain is that the government of India will keep its eyes and ears and all agencies open to see whether investments is coming into India from China via Singapore, via these Mauritius and other peripheral countries. And we have to be very cautious because the Chinese have to see that while the rest of the world economy is
very interesting
going down, they need to keep their economy afloat.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Very interesting
they have
point.
to find out ways and means to do it.
Ways and means to do
they
it.
Planned
You
it.
know,
They planned it.
You know, Supriya, I want to come to you. See, the point is, Professor Swaran Singh and I were speaking on Saturday, and he seemed to suggest that you can't wish away China. At a time when you would try to revive your economy, you will have to depend on a global economic superpower in China. Either you decide that, no, I've got nothing to do with China anymore. I'm going to revive my economy minus China. But that's not going to happen. In a situation like this, how far do you go, Supriya?
No, it's a valid point, but I will make a counter argument to that. The counter argument is, how much does China open up? I mean, China is extremely discriminatory as far as access for our own tech companies is concerned. China has been called a currency manipulator, not by us, but various other countries, including the United States. Their goods become affordable, which hurts all our other exports. So China has also been taking things to their advantage. So China taking the moral high ground and today saying WTO rules. China hasn't even abided by the South China Sea rulings by UNCLOS. So China cannot preach the world and India WTO rules because we should not listen to them. They have limited access of people, investments and countries into their own markets. But yeah, we can't wish away China because 23 unicorns, 23 startups in India that have the valuation of $1 billion, 18 of them have Chinese investments. But what we have to also do is, just saying FDI is not going to be through the automatic route. We will review it. The government will have the power to review it. We will also have to see FII and FPI investments. SEBI and RBI will also have to be involved because share markets acquisition happen through a very different route.
True.
You can then stop hostile takeovers. You can stop potential deals if China takes that route.
True.
So we can't wish away China, but we can be very
Very,
careful.
very, very significant.
And this is also a time to negotiate with China and say, give us a level playing field if you want one.
So this could be a sort of in a post-coronavirus scenario, an ability that India will have to negotiate with China. Seshadri Chari, I want to come to you now. See, I think we've established that India is not going to snap economic ties with China or take this down south as far as it can go. Obviously, we have been diplomatic even in our dealing right now with China. So what exactly should be done? See, again, the same question. In a post-coronavirus scenario, our economy will need investment. China is a huge investor. What if there is a situation where China says, fine, I'm pulling out of the investment in your country?
So
how do we deal with this strategically?
No, I think there will be a huge shift in the trade and geopolitical architecture of the world. So it's very difficult to really plan. As of today, we cannot plan what we should be doing in July or August or September. So we will have to probably recalibrate our trade and foreign policy sometime in, say, August. But as far as the short-term and long-term methods are concerned, as in a short term, this is what we have done. See, our trade, China is one of the biggest trade partners with India. But out of $95 billion, I think almost $75 to $80 billion is on their side.
True.
So it's a very skewed relationship.
Skewed relationship, correct.
So we will have to actually deal with China from a very different perspective.
Correct.
And you just mentioned that China is an economic superpower. It is not.
Okay.
These kind of hostile takeovers does not make it a superpower. And many European Union countries are now going to revise their economic relationship with China. WTO has already slapped a number of cases against China. US is fighting more than 900 cases of intellectual property rights. So all these matters will come up and it will be China versus the rest of the world as far as economy is concerned.
Interesting. All right.
In such a situation, we will have to recalibrate our not only foreign policy, but also the economic
policy. Very well said.
We will have to improve our manufacturing sector. What has happened is in the last 2 decades, we have lost our manufacturing
to the Chinese. Absolutely. I agree. And I mean, if India wants to reap the benefits of the world's anger against China, then you will have to ramp up your manufacturing. It's been spoken about a lot. Certainly not the last discussion. We'll carry forward this discussion later also, as there will be several other moments. Professor Swaran Singh, Lieutenant General Shankar Prasad, Supriya Shinate, as well as Sheshadri Chari, thank you so much. India's strategy has to be very, very different from the world's as we deal with China. We have started, we have seen the response. How far will this go? How ugly will this become? We'll only know later in time.